Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, everybody. Justin and Abby are back.
We're back.
We're back from Spain.
We went to Spain.
Yeah, we're sitting in my nerd cave.
We are absolutely in your nerve cave.
Nerve cave?
Nerd.
My nerd cave.
Your nerd
We're
cave.
in the nerd cave. Over my right shoulder is a castle. Coming out of that castle is He-Man. It's Castle Grayskull. And there's a lot of good
lot
things.
of scenes everywhere. There's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's
There are a bunch of elves attacking ogres over here.
ogres.
In this other castle?
I don't even know what half these things are called, to be honest.
You don't.
Yeah, this is
Doesn't
either like
matter.
a kid's dream room or a kid's nightmare room.
Yeah,
I think for me
because-
it would have been my nightmare.
Well, it's a nightmare for any kids because they walk in here and they go, I can't touch any of it because this old man won't let me.
Well, I was more like it's a nightmare because like they're like scary looking war scenes.
Yeah.
For me, like when I was like a 5-year-old girl, that would have been like, why do these dolls have glowing eyes? Why do they look like monsters? Mom!
Yeah.
I would have never come back to your house.
Well,
Okay.
I successfully scared you away then, huh?
We went to Spain. We should tell people what it's like. They like to hear that kind of stuff.
No, let's not do that. Let's go another direction.
No, they would. Just a quick recap.
We went to Spain. We made it there, and it was
We came
taxing, and we came back.
We had 2 weeks of treatments. We worked
I
with-
got some treatments as well. Real cool thing. It just so happens that I was able to partake in some treatments, and they said they looked at my blood and they saw my white blood cells attacking themselves.
Yep.
And they said it was lucky that we caught it when we did, because had we not, it
You'd
would
gone
turn into a major
full-blown-
autoimmune disorder.
Yep.
And so that was a pretty cool deal.
It was a real good time that my body decided to freak out.
Yeah, for me, I guess it did, huh?
Yeah. So we went there. We work with a guy named Dr. Helu. If you're listening to this podcast, don't email me and ask me about him. You can just find him online. I don't know his information. Like, you can find out.
Yeah,
online.
you can find him online.
Yeah, Dr. Helu.
HILU.
And he's wonderful. And we met with him the first day. He looked at our blood before we told him any of our symptoms or what was going on. And he was insanely accurate.
Yeah. I mean, looking at my blood, he was like, hey, do you at nighttime, does it feel like your eyes are kind of starting to go out when you're driving at night specifically? And I was like, yes. He's like, yeah, it's showing up in your blood. You're missing these things right here, and it's going to cause your eyes to like wane and not work.
And then he was like, do you have pain right here? And he pointed to a specific spot
on my neck. And I was like, yeah, my lymph node is all like in pain here. And he was like, yep, it's showing up here that your lymphatic system needs some help, and it should be coming up in your neck, specifically in that spot. And
yeah.
I was
and then
like, you voodoo doctor.
Yeah. And then I had so in the past month, the timeline is so funny. I went to Mexico. We did a procedure in December. Then I got really, really sick. That's what kind of stirred everything up in my body. And then I started doing treatments in San Diego. I did a treatment in San Diego for a week, came back for a week, did another treatment in San Diego for a week, came back for a week, then went to Spain for 2 weeks. But since doing the treatments, I got a lump in my boob and also got COVID. It was like a very, like, everything happened all at once. But so I went and had it checked literally like a day before we went to Spain, got the results that it was a cyst and lots of cysts everywhere. Yeah. I'm cystic. So when we got there, I hadn't told him any of that. He looked at my blood and he said, oh, now you're cystic. Your body's producing a bunch of cysts, which is crazy that he can tell that kind of stuff from your blood.
It was super cool, super helpful.
Yeah, he could tell a lot of the symptoms.
So by the end of 2 weeks, there was some major shifts in our blood work, and no longer to have white blood cells fighting each other. And
I had like so many more white blood cells, and they were
Yeah,
stronger.
you had parasites in your blood.
I had lots of things going on.
There's a whole lot. So.
But the way that it works for those of you who are following along, which is everyone who's listening, basically, we're forcing you to follow along, is so the treatments were like kind of like a spa. Like for me, Justin's treatments were more painful. For me, they were all relaxing. Most of them were relaxing. And but then after that, we'd go home and just crash all day.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain. It's like having the flu all the time.
Yeah, it was one of those where it was like you want to go out and explore Spain, but you have no capacity. All you can do is sit and watch TV.
Yes.
That's exactly what it was.
That's we watched an entire season of Suits.
2 seasons.
I
powered through
Suits.
2 seasons. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was delightful. And then we came back, and do you want to explain the healing process?
So we have, the way that it works is that the blood cycles through your body. It takes 4 months for entirely new blood to cycle through. And that's when the results really hit. And last time, 2 years ago, in June/July is when the 4-month mark was for Abby's treatment. And all of a sudden there was a pretty radical change at almost exactly the 4-month mark, where all of her energy started hitting really hard and all of a sudden had tons of capacity. And so we've got like a 4-month wait. And to really see the results of that take effect.
Yeah. So it's kind of hopeful to know, like, there were things that got better for me already that I could see a difference. Actually, I would say like almost everyone who's seen me said I look different already. Yeah. Everyone's like, wow, I didn't realize how sick you were looking, how bad your skin was looking.
You were looking disgusting.
Yeah, they were. I mean, everybody's like, you already look better. So that feels hopeful, because that happened last time too for me. And I can see it now looking back. My skin was like becoming gray.
Yeah.
And now it's coming back to life. But somebody wrote this to me, one of my sweet friends, Mary, before we went, and I loved it because it's so adequately. Everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, you went to Spain. How was it?" Or before we went, "Oh my gosh, you're going to Spain. That's so exciting." And I was always like, is it? It's a 30 to 40 hour travel scenario to get to a city that I'm choosing because of a health treatment, not because of the exoticness of it. But so this person wrote this, and I just thought it was a great example of compassion. So I'm going to read it. I just want to hold space and acknowledge out loud how completely hurtful and deep pain it must be to be traveling internationally to a beautiful country for the second time, to embrace pain and suffering and so much heaviness and unknown. How sucky to get to do something that looks fun, but to have to do it in the worst way possible. It feels like such a cruel loss, traveling to Europe for misery rather than refreshment. And I just felt really seen by that.
Yeah, totally.
I felt really loved by her thoughtfulness and response in it. And because I think that everybody thought it was pretty exotic.
Mm-hmm.
And then they didn't know what it was like.
No, they didn't.
Yep.
But we did.
But
we did. Anyways, we're back, and we're excited for this summer and what that'll bring for both of us as we are infused with the power of the gods.
I have the power.
Anyways, so for today's episode, you ready to jump into it?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
We're going to talk about something that I think we feel very passionate about, as far as people coming to terms with. And it's going to be the conversation around messiness, being messy, being human.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the most vital, one of the most vital things necessary to truly learning how to come alive is embracing the reality of messiness.
Yeah. Gosh. Do you have to choose? Like, I often think about, what's the goal of life? Is it to become perfect? Is it to become look like you figured it out? Is it like, for me, the longer I've been alive, the more existential crises I've gone through. The more I thought, I think the goal of life is to become more human.
I would say even more so to accept our humanity.
Well, hear me out.
Okay, I'm ready to hear you out.
I think we're saying different things. So,
yeah.
I think we can become less human, and I think we can become more human. And so less human is when we dissociate from ourselves.
Right.
when we disconnect from ourselves, when we avoid, we run, we cope.
We deny our feelings.
We live in addictions, or we live in worlds that aren't real. So anytime I'm being plastic, I'm acting like I have it all together. I'm not being connected. Another word would be whole. The goal would be to be more whole, or living more wholeheartedly, or living more authentically, or living more present, connected to it. That's kind of where I've landed. When I say to be more human, it's like to be less dissociated.
Yeah.
To be less fractured, to be less disconnected from myself, which means being okay with pain, being okay with mess. Like, you cannot be more human while trying to be less human.
Yeah. I think that acknowledging messiness is probably one of the most terrifying things for humans to do.
Yes.
To acknowledge messiness, because there's so many caveats to what that could mean.
Yeah.
Like, I look at my own life, and it's like there's this terror inside of us that our worst beliefs about our identity and our value are true.
I'm really not lovable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always going to be abandoned. Everybody else is better than me. I'll always be a failure. I'm not worth fighting for. Whatever those fears are that grab us, everybody can see that I'm a fraud. I'll never be as good as everyone else. I'm the one broken person in humanity. All of those lies.
Everybody's better than me.
We're all terrified that they're true.
Yep. And the minute that I just begin to say, like, yeah, there's a lot of areas where I'm really effed up in my thinking, my behavior. It's messy. I just am. Like, we think that the minute we say that, it's going to validate all the lies.
Yes.
And it's going to imprint on our entire life. And suddenly we are going to be disposed of. We're suddenly going to be thrown out.
We're going to not be loved. We're going to be
not be chosen.
Yep.
We're going to be alienated, isolated, segregated.
Totally. And I mean, we grew up in our generation. I think church really did this. And I think some churches still do. It depends on, and religion, not just Christian churches, but all religions.
All religions
have a set of rules that they are saying you need to live by. And there's high punishment if you don't live by them.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a place for you to learn how to put on the facade to look like what they're saying you need to do to belong.
Yeah.
And every system of thought, like, it could be a cult that you're involved in. It could be a political system that you're involved in.
Right.
It's not just religion that does it. It's any strong system creates these structures of you belong if you look like this.
Yeah.
And so it becomes so easy to we want belonging so deeply in our nature. We want to feel like we are connected. We want to feel safe. Like, I often think so much of safety and survival is wired into humanity. So back in the day, to survive, you needed a tribe. Yeah. Because, well, one, other tribes could come murder you if you didn't have a tribe.
Plunder the village.
Animals could come.
Yeah.
You may not be able to have enough hunters to get enough food. You may not have enough protection. Like, you needed to... Loners back in the day had a lower chance of survival.
Yeah.
Being a part of the tribe, you had a higher chance of survival. So there's this deep innate thing in all of us that wants to feel like we belong, and that we are chosen, and that we're loved, and that we matter. And most places that we're in has things that feel like subconscious rules for belonging.
Yeah. I think that when we're so about avoiding acknowledging our messiness, it's the place where we get most shut down. Like, because we get paralyzed. We get paralyzed with anxiety. We get paralyzed with performance because we're putting all of our effort into being something else rather than what we are. And we never get a chance to really come alive because we can't just say, hey, I am messy. I'm not going to try and perform. I'm not just going to try and survive. We have to begin, like you were saying, we believe this idea that from historically that we're going to need people. And if we make a mess, we're not going to have people, it's going to be gone, and then we won't be able to survive. And that's really one of the big things that happens when I talk to clients about the idea of embracing their mess. They're like, well, I'm going to lose everyone then.
Totally.
That's the first thing out of their mouth. And that's the biggest lie inside of their world. What happens is people who begin the process of acknowledging, hey, I actually have mess. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like this thing where someone slowly pokes their head out of a hole and is like, hey, I just want to acknowledge something. I think the sky is blue. And everyone else is like, I was thinking the same thing, but everyone was saying it was red. We had to all agree that it was red. Do I really think the truth is it's blue? And slowly everyone else is like, it's okay to say that it's blue. I've observed that it's blue too. And what you start having is in an environment when one person begins to be brave in that way, everyone else begins to get on the bandwagon because everyone is dying to really be honest about their reality of their experience. We're actually exhausted by denying the reality of what's happening.
That's so true.
It chips away at us.
Yeah, and that's what I would say. Not only do people feel relieved, we just had Bryant on recently on the podcast.
Bryant Ellis, and he was from the Adventure Challenge, and he was talking about
going to rehab.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I was just adding into it. I was finishing your sentence.
Yeah. So he was telling me that he finds now in conversations, he'll throw out that he went to rehab or he went sober or whatever. And so many people will share that story back. And he's like, I would have never.
Reflect their own personal experience.
Yeah. They'll be like, oh my gosh, me too. Oh my gosh, me too. And I've seen that happen. I remember this started for me when I was a teenager, when I shared for the first time that I masturbated, which is a funny thing. Every single person, I thought I was terrified to tell somebody that I masturbated.
No one else out there doing this.
I mean, I honestly believed I was like the only one. That's real. I really did. I didn't understand sexuality. Didn't have good homeschool.
The world is just filled with masturbators.
It is filled with masturbators. But I remember every girl I told was like, oh my God, me too. And most of them had never told people before. And so I found that there is this place that when you start to become authentic, you'll find so many people know what messiness is in their own life, and they have their own thing they're trying to sort out. And they didn't know they were allowed to share it with you until you shared yours. And then you'll find every once in a while a few people that like can't relate or judge you or whatever. And you'll find that easily you transition from having those people be in your world, because the more authentic you are, and the more messy you are, it pulls people into being honest in that with you.
Yeah.
Or
it scares people away.
And it scares people away.
Because they may have to actually engage in that type of reality.
Yeah.
And face the messiness inside of their own world.
But then you find that there's a whole tribe of people out there that have been dying to be seen and known and heard for who they actually are. It
is such a breath of fresh air when someone says, yeah, I'm jacked up in all these ways. I think of like when clients have come into my office and I share fights we've been in, yelling, screaming, cussing at each other, disconnection, pulling away from each other. I start opening up about all those things, and they're like, are you serious? Yeah, we just had that fight the other night. And they're like, you just had a fight? You're in here talking to me about emotions and you had a fight? Yeah, and I didn't do it well either. I totally crapped the bed.
Totally.
And all of a sudden they're like, oh, the stakes aren't so high. Mm-hmm. And not only am I not alone, but there's actually hope for me being able to get out of some of the place that I am. Because this person right here is being able to live, Justin is being able to help people and do a lot of things. And he is messy, because the idea is that messiness disqualifies us.
Totally.
But it's interesting because people who will not acknowledge their messiness, they're still doing all those things. They haven't been disqualified from it. They're just hiding their messiness.
Yes.
And it's like, why does the idea of just accepting and saying out loud, like, yep, here are the areas that I'm messy in, suddenly create a disqualification that wasn't there a few seconds ago?
Well, I know for me, like, I think we should just rewind back. I know some of this was so subconscious for me when I was younger. Like, I have, I tell my story all the time. Before I got sick, traveled the world, spoke, shared my story all over the world about how tormented I was and how suicidal I was. I was suicidal starting at 7, so tormented, hated myself, had to go on a huge journey of getting out of that. And all of the people from my childhood, so many of them like ended up listening to my story and hearing it. And they were like, we had no idea.
Right. That was
and
going
they were
on.
devastated. I mean, like so many people were devastated that happened and that they didn't know that had happened. And they were like, I wish I would have known. I would have helped. I would have got involved. I would have. And I honestly I felt so fucked up and so broken. There was not even a chance in my head that I imagined people didn't see how bad it was. You know what I mean?
I felt the same way in my own life.
Like when they said they were shocked, I was like, really? I felt
had
like
so many
it was,
people
I was
shocked
bleeding
too.
that out.
Yeah, I had so many people shocked too. Like when they heard more of our story on here on the Connected Life, they were like, what?
Yeah.
That was real? I
Totally.
was like, yes. How? And I was convinced. I was like, everyone sees how screwed up I am.
Yeah. But unless you're actually like, exploring it verbally and telling people.
Yeah, it's really hidden.
It is really hidden. We have such an ability to dissociate, to look one way on the outside. But so we got married, and I feel like we were the people always trumpeting authenticity. We were way more authentic than anyone I knew. Way more open about stuff than anyone I knew. We were the ones on the cutting edge of like talking about everything, talking about sexuality, talking about
especially
fights,
within
talking about
the faith institution.
Yeah, we were so open and like people felt so liberated being around us because we were just real about stuff. But I look back and I'm like, we didn't, like there was so much of hiddenness in our lives.
Still, yeah.
Still, we weren't fully honest with ourselves about the mess. I mean, I wasn't fully honest with myself I don't think either of us were. And then we weren't fully honest with the people around us about how messy it was. And I can look back and remember times where I was like, but you need to have authority to be a speaker or to be teaching in church or to be whatever. You're supposed to be an expert. And this is one of the reasons that I really struggle with how they have the hierarchy of pastors and or priests or whatever, clergymen, whatever it is in any institution. We end up thinking they should be masters at life.
Yeah.
And they should be masters at life by a young age. Some of them are leading things by 20, 25. I was.
Totally.
And I was like acting like I was a master at life and like I knew and I should be teaching people, and they followed me like I should be teaching them. And so there becomes, it's easy one to have ego, like, oh, I've figured things out enough that you think I should be. So I'll tell you all the things like you should. And then there's also this like, for you to listen to me, I have to have this figured out. So I'm not even going to listen to my own doubts. Let's say I'm teaching people about faith in God. Well, I'm not going to even acknowledge the places where I have doubt.
My own doubts or fears about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I need to be leading from this place where I'm ahead of you.
Yeah.
And there's such pressure internally. Like, I don't remember anybody externally telling me you need to have it more together to be a leader.
No. Yeah.
But internally, there was the belief.
I think there are systems that definitely, at least I've experienced the systems that maybe don't say it directly to you, but it's the unspoken rule that I've experienced.
Oh, yeah. They kick you out if you're messy.
Totally.
So they're definitely not going to let you lead if you're messy.
No.
And you're definitely not sure if they're going to love you if you're messy.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember very clearly knowing like, I cuss. I love cussing. I feel fine with cussing.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about it biblically. We could do all the things. I remember, being like, well, I can never cuss in church.
Yeah.
Because that will end everything.
Mm-hmm.
And even like I was terrified to cuss on our podcast for a long time or to do things like that, even though it's very authentic to me. It was And so having to work through like, what does it look like to honor where people are at and love them and
be yourself
and be myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. More thoughts on that?
That was the end of it. It's just the balance. And I think like for me, owning that I am like, so it was a really hard hit. I would say like 5 years ago, our whole life exploded. My whole life exploded. And someday I'll probably tell the story of it. But until then, people can just wonder what that means. And I became so aware that everything I thought I knew, I didn't. And I remember working with a counselor. She's like, you're very dissociated. And I'm like, what? No counselor had ever told me this. And I'd seen counselors since I was 12. And she made me do this emotion exercise where she made me write out emotions that I can feel and then draw where they happen in my body and what's going on in my body when I have them. And I honestly didn't know what emotions felt like in my body. I couldn't describe what emotions were. I mean, the main ones, I'd be like happy, sad, angry, but I couldn't even describe what they felt like well. And I, at that point, have been teaching emotional health classes for over a decade, and I couldn't explain emotions. And I realized I didn't even know what being in my body during emotions was. Uh-huh. And here I am, having been like, I am now famous for emotional intelligence. And I'm an idiot at emotional. I'm just kidding. But both are true. It was so humbling. It was
there was a lot of understanding and wisdom of emotions that you had.
Oh, yeah.
Applied to your own self. And experiencing it within, being able to define it within was different than the logical, wise understanding that you had happening.
Yeah, but I'm not going to negate. I was very emotionally intelligent. It's a natural knack that I have. I could always hear I have an ability to tune in and hear people's hearts. It's a gifting I've had from super, super young. My dad was a counselor. So obviously I have so much that I learned at such a young age, emotional intelligence wise. And then I really did have a natural gift where I could open people's hearts up instantly and do like surgery with them.
Yeah.
And I myself walked through so much heart surgery with me and you and God. And so there wasn't a fakeness. It wasn't like there was no depth of it. But at the same time, I didn't know anything about trauma. I didn't know anything about being dissociated from my body. I didn't know. It was like I both knew everything and knew nothing at the same time.
It's very interesting.
And the concept, though, was I was terrified, I remember, of people finding that out. Because then they would think I was a fraud.
Yeah.
You have all these issues that you're just realizing that you haven't dealt with, even though your message is deal with stuff.
It's funny because the messiness with regards to fraudulency, I've had some very high level power hitters in different areas of society that I've met with, from executives to sports to athletes to different things that I've spoken with, where they're like, oh my God, nobody knows that I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm supposedly some major player in my arena. But if they only knew, I feel like a little child. If they only knew that I don't have an answer up until I maybe get lucky and get one, or things like that. And I watch as, because they won't acknowledge it, they're consistently in some form of turmoil.
Yeah.
And I've seen such relief when they're like, yeah, I actually feel these ways to me. And they're like, oh my God, that's the first time I've really told anyone that I feel so fraudulent and I really don't have X, Y, and Z and whatever. And I just think that like part of my own personal journey of acknowledging like, yeah, I'm really, because there's this thing that I always had to have it all together. I had to have it all together within my household. And I was really like, I was very driven, performance-y. And I think we've both had a very similar monster of being able to be perfect in certain ways. And I felt so taxed by it. And I think that even as we got into the connected life and started the process of talking about the messy things, that I felt such relief of like, I also don't have to become one of the leaders.
Yes,
that
I know.
Is trapped inside of their prison.
I know.
Pretending that everything's okay, and just dying until they either like have their entire world burned to the ground, or until they just give up and tap out or whatever. And so that for me has been a really big gift to just be like, yeah, I'm really messy. Here, guys, here's some stories about that inside of it. But I was thinking the other day, even I was talking to one of our life consulting masterclass, our LCMC students that we're training.
I'm loving it. One of my favorite things
we're having incredible encounters with all of our students, and they're all like coming alive, and it's really cool to watch. But there was one of them was triggered. I was on, and I got on a phone call with them to kind of walk them through a process. And I just really got into telling them like, hey, as much as you feel, very thankful for how I'm able to show up with you here, I want you to know that there's probably going to be a time I'm going to offend you. There's probably going to be a time when I, say or do something in reaction to one of the students that you'll observe, and you'll be like, that's completely goes against what he teaches.
Totally.
And I want you to know I'm going to do that.
Yes.
And I said, and I'm going to fail really miserably. And there's going to be people that get hurt by me in this course.
Absolutely.
Whether it's an email, it's a conversational exchange, it's a live consulting thing that I do, that I run over someone and I don't know it. I don't mean to do it, or I'm reactive to it.
Yeah.
And I said, but that's what you're going to have to accept, is that I am very aware of my humanity, and I'm aware that I'm not going to be perfect. And you have permission to not be perfect here too with me.
Yes.
And we're going to all fail forward together in this, and try to figure out how to love and see each other in the midst of our messiness.
There's something that is so relieving to the soul to just own. Like, I feel so much less shame now that I just own how screwed up I am.
Yeah.
Like, I think people are scared to admit it because they're afraid that the shame will kill them.
Yeah.
Like, if I admit that I struggle with control, if I admit that I struggle with addiction, if I admit, then that will make me bad. Instead, it's like really liberated me to be like, this is true about me. There, so much of the pain in life is when our reality is denied.
Yeah.
And so whether we're denying our own reality or someone else's, like when I'm saying like, oh, this doesn't matter, but it actually does matter. Or, oh, I'm not being controlling. I'm just wanting the best for you. Like, whenever we're denying what is real, there's a disconnection, a dissociation from reality. And so our own souls feel in alignment when we are saying what is true.
Yeah.
What is true is I'm still working through my crap. I have a lot of crap to work through.
Yeah. I see 2 counselors a week.
Do you?
Yeah.
I thought you saw them every other week.
Well,
so you see 2 counselors.
I see 2 counselors in a week. I see them every other week. And then sometimes one of them I see more than that. Yeah. And stuff like that. But, and I cry a lot. I talk about where I feel like I'm failing at stuff. Like I'm being challenged about stuff. And I don't feel, I would have 6 years ago, 7 years ago, talking about certain aspects of that in real time, would have felt a lot of shame about it in some ways.
Oh yeah. That's how I did it. That's a lot of how I did authenticity. Is I just talked about it in past
tense versus
whatever the past had happened.
Right.
So I sounded really vulnerable.
I felt a lot of peace about talking about my past, but in a moment, exactly, I felt a lot of shame in areas of saying, hey, this is where I'm failing at.
It's still happening. I'm still not put together. I wish, like, I actually told our students this. I was like, honestly, when you get so broken that you can't pretend that you're not broken. Yeah. When you get so broken that you can't put up the facade that you're fine and that everything's fine and that you're killing it at life, it is liberating.
There's a difference between an identity statement I am broken and a acceptance of a reality of messiness.
Yes.
I'm pointing that out because some people will have conversations where they're like, you need to accept that you're not that broken.
Yeah.
And that's actually a conversation stating to their identity.
Absolutely.
Which is like identifying with brokenness as this is who I am. I am a broken person.
Yeah. Versus
I have brokenness are 2 very different things.
Totally.
Like, and when we can look at something and be like, oh, I can say that I have brokenness or messiness or humanity, however, whatever language you want to try and use for it, and just be like, that's just an avenue of expression of my journey of discovering love. It is what it is. There's a lot of peace inside of that. And you don't have to combat it by acting like it doesn't exist, because a lot of times people will try and act like it doesn't exist to get over the hurdle of this is an identity statement. No, it's not there. It's not a big deal. No, it is there.
Yeah.
And it still doesn't mean anything negative about you.
Yeah.
It just is. And go ahead.
No, you go.
Yeah, I'll go. And really it becomes an invitation to come alive at that point.
Yeah.
Like it's not about brooding on all my defects. That's not what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Embracing our messiness and being able to acknowledge like, yeah, I'm messy.
So good, Justin.
Isn't about brooding over our brokenness.
No. It's not about meditating on it and then hating
being
ourselves.
Like, look at all the terrible things inside of me. I'm
No.
so crappy. That is not the conversation that's being had. It's matter of fact information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have it all together. Yeah, sometimes I still lie. Yeah, sometimes I still get angry. Yes, sometimes I still pull away. Yes, sometimes I still blow up. Yeah, sometimes I still treat people poorly. Whatever it is,
yeah.
It's just being like, yeah, it happens. And I think that there's this, I've watched a group of people that are very reactive. So they go from the performance end of stuff, and their reactionary pendulum swing is to go over to a whole other side and say, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm not only going to embrace the idea that I'm messy, but I'm going to keep making messes as a lifestyle.
Right.
So it becomes a lifestyle of chaos and destruction that is then actively participated in to be like, I don't have to perform anymore. I'm not going to perform. Whereas loving oneself is saying like, hey, I'm messy and I want to figure out how to allow love to hit me in such a way that it starts resolving the messiness, that it starts healing it, not because I have to get fixed so people don't think I'm bad, but because I actually just want to thrive. I want to heal. I want to feel freedom. I want to feel joy. I want to feel more peace inside of my life.
Yeah, it's no longer about earning people's affection or feeling worthy, but it
Correct.
is about what feels good. And I'm like, when I'm broken and I make poor decisions for myself, I'm in more pain. Like I think about this last year. The last 2 years, there were times that I was in so much pain. If I could have done drugs, like I was like in such a funny scenario. I couldn't drink because of the problems I was having in my body. I would have drank. I would have become an alcoholic if I could have. I'm sure I would have. If I could have done drugs, there was like so many reasons why certain drugs wouldn't even be something that I could do because of what was going on in my body. It was like so frustrating. But I remember thinking I would want to do this if I could, just to get out of the pain. At the same time, I remember thinking, but I wouldn't want to do those because I'm in so much pain. I wouldn't want to add more pain
to my situation.
I wouldn't want to add more pain. And I know that I would feel an escape for a minute and then there would be more pain put on there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it becomes something where it's like, as I acknowledge my mess and get at peace with myself and the world around me, then it's actually about redeeming pain, healing pain, finding triumph over it.
It's interesting because I had a timer for how long I was allowed to be broken.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, 5 years ago, my whole world broke. And I thought, okay, but I'll get over this in a year. And then, okay, but I'll get over this in 2 years. And then, and we're 5 years out and I'm still having PTSD reactions to things. And they're less than they were.
Well, like, your story sounds depressive. Nobody wants to hear that.
They're so much less than they were.
Yeah.
And I'm more whole than I was. Like I don't feel like trapped in it anymore. But I let go of the timer is what I'm saying. I let go of the I should be better by now. I let go of the why am I still working through this? I let go of the rules are if I was a strong person, this wouldn't affect me still.
Right.
And I actually saw people that went through something similar. Like I have two best friends who actually went through something very similar to me, but in different times in their life. And it took them years. And when I say years to get over it, it wasn't like they were trapped in it, but the little underpinnings of reactions and responses and filters and triggers around it. Like it did take them a while because it was painful. And so I kind of, the idea that you should be somewhere by a certain point.
Yeah.
It's also helped me embrace my age and be like, I'm going to be like, because I'm more relaxed. I'm less judgmental. I'm less upset.
Can I add something on that?
Yeah.
Well, when you talk about being less judgmental, I think that there's this it's so incredible the way that compassion begins to compile in our soul as we embrace our messiness, because then all of a sudden, we talked about this, about the idea of common humanity, and I don't want to go back into that. That was a few episodes ago, but as we're embracing our messiness, acknowledging it, we all of a sudden look at people and go, you're no different than me.
Yep.
We're the same.
Yep.
I'm the same as you. Your messiness may manifest entirely differently, but we're still the same. And I actually can have compassion for where you're at. I don't need to judge you for it, because I'm no longer judging myself as having to be perfect. I'm not going to judge you as having to be perfect. And it's really relieving, and it's really bonding. It starts repairing relationships as we get out of that place of judgment and acknowledging our own mess. I want to add actually one other thing to that. What was it? I forgot.
Well, think about it. One of the things I will say is that when we're talking about accepting that we're messy, exactly what you just said is so important, the compassion part.
Yeah.
First, I have to own I'm doing behavior that is, like, I have a lot of things I do that are dysfunctional. I've had to own more in our marriage in the last 3 years than my whole life. It feels like it's like a constant recognition of how many. Well, once you start to understand trauma, you start to see that you're doing trauma responses all the time. But my compassion level has grown with my verbalization of my dysfunctions. Like and this is something that I know is unique about how I frame pain. Like when I think about still having pain from what happened 5 years ago, I don't feel hopeless about that. I literally think that just validates that I went through something that was soul shattering. I don't think it means.
Just so we're clear, I didn't have an affair. If anyone's thinking that in the back of their head, like Justin didn't do some shit like that.
Yeah. That's good. But so, no, it was like 20 events that happened at once that just broke me from every side.
Yeah.
But what happened was, like, I look at the pain from that I'm still going through, and I just think, wow, that means it really did affect me. It feels validating when I'm still having to work through it. Like, wow, that really affected me. And that always just feels good to my soul. It never feels like I'm weak. It never feels like I'm bad. And then I have so much compassion. I'm like, wow, that girl was trying so hard. She was surviving so much. That girl was like stuck right back into a very traumatic situation. That girl was not okay, you know?
Yeah. Well, I remember what I was going to say. Sorry to veer a little off of what you're saying, but it was about this idea that messiness and embracing our messiness is just acknowledging that we're in a progressive revelation of unrelenting love.
Yeah.
Right. So people are all trying to change behavior, and the behavior modification deal, which is fine. I want to like treat people better and act, different. But really, all of our human journey is about us being restored to the cloth that we were originally cut from, which this cloth that we were cut from was unrelenting love. It's this loving creator that said, I made you in and through love. I made you for love. And I want to restore you back to that. I want to restore all of your being, bring it back into the knowledge of love and the experience of love. And so when we look at our entire journey and you just start embracing the mess, you go, okay, this isn't about fixing me. Healthiness and wholeness really is about me embracing the journey of returning to love.
Yeah.
And becoming reconnected relationally, like to relationally reconnect to love. Like, oh, there's a relationship with love that is being repaired, that felt like it got shattered in my relationship with shame and my relationship with self-hatred and all the things that bombard us inside of our little human hell experience that we're having as we're so tormented. And all that to say, it really takes the stakes out of all of it. It takes the performance out of it, and it takes the timing out of all of it. Because this is what was provoked, because you were talking about time frame and stuff. And I was thinking, like, the whole time frame here, the earth, the encapsulation of earth is just this beautiful time frame, time dispensation, where we get to have progressive revelations of what this unrelenting love is. And so if I'm doing that through the course of however long I live here, if it's 80, 90 years, then it's successful. If I've just been moving moving the needle more towards an understanding of receiving love, expressing love, and that's it. And we can only really participate fully in that when we get fully honest with our messiness, because it's our messiness that is waiting for love to meet it. And if we're not acknowledging it, it means we have our messiness buried deep within us in a hidden cave where love isn't able to get to. But when I take it out on the surface and I put it out in my hand in front of everyone and just display it and say, like, yeah, I'm messy, it now has full access for love to come meet it. That means acceptance, care, kindness, gentleness, patience, like understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that what you're saying is so beautiful. If we remember that the goal is love, because when we're talking about, like, we're not saying embrace brokenness as an identity. We're saying there is a place where you can be so loved that you can be fully who you are and not feel like you need to be more than who you are.
Yeah. There's
a place where you can feel that love is stronger than shame, and forgiveness is stronger than the mistakes that you've made, and where you can actually believe there is a love that is so good that you can be fully yourself and be fully seen in all of the goodness and all of the mess. And you can be seen, like, God has the ability to see the essence of who we are and to deeply understand the messy parts and why they're there.
Yeah.
To understand our survival instincts and how we're trying to protect ourselves, and to understand the beauty and the gifts and the bravery that we have as humans. Like, I was just walking someone through some pain reactions that they have, and they've locked up being they don't want to be vulnerable because they experience such deep rejection that they're terrified of being vulnerable again. And I just was overwhelmed when I was working with them. I'm like, you're being so, all of a sudden I saw, like, before I'd seen their life and I'd been like, yeah, you avoid vulnerability at all costs. Like, yeah. I had seen that as truth. And, but in this moment when I'm walking through it with them and they're explaining their pain and we're going through it, I'm literally like, oh, you're being every little thing that is hugely vulnerable for you that I wouldn't think is vulnerable to me.
Right.
That's you being so brave. That's you, like, it's costing you everything to be that vulnerable. Even though for me, that doesn't feel that vulnerable.
Yeah.
But for you, it's everything. And God has a way of seeing the cost of whatever it is for us, whatever it's taking for us to choose to acknowledge about ourselves, or to choose, like, he sees why we've done the worst things that we've done.
Yeah.
Like, I think about you, and your PTSD would probably be an area that you've had to forgive yourself for.
Yeah.
The ways that you displayed PTSD inside of our marriage.
Yeah.
Does that feel true?
Yeah.
It's something you've had to forgive yourself for. But in all honesty, all of it was from what you experienced. Self-protectors, like trauma responses.
Yeah.
And so if you can actually begin to have both the compassion for why you're messy, and not in a, like, well, I'm allowed to be messy now, I can do whatever I want because I went through hard shit.
Right.
But, like, I know why I've done these things. And to know that there's a God who, the way that the God looks at you is not through human judgment.
Right.
Is not looking at you with black and white, shame, good or bad, right or wrong. God is looking at you, understanding your personal story, where you came from, every pain, every wound, every dysfunction, every broken heart. He understands every piece of why you've done what you've done.
Yeah.
He understands you more. Like, he actually wants to lead you on the journey of having compassion for your own story.
Right.
Like, the more I've walked with God, the more compassion I have had for my own story.
Yeah.
If you are getting to know his nature, because it says in the Bible that God is the father of all compassion. Did you want to jump in?
Well, I was just going to say, he understands the hell that we can't see that we're in.
Yeah.
Right. We can't even see that we're in hell,
in
a hellish state, a tormenting state. We don't understand. We can't see it, but he's like, not only do I see it, I understand it.
Because I've been in it.
And yeah, I've been in it. And I want to reveal the reality of it to you to liberate you out of it. Because I'm actually wanting to take you out of a prison. Because God looks at it as we're all prisoners. We're all within our own personal prisons, our own torments, whatever. And like when he looks at an addiction, he doesn't look at it as you're a failure. Why are you such a screw up? He goes, oh, there's a prison.
You're in hell.
You're in hell right there. And I want to liberate you out of that prison. I've come to give you liberty. I've come to free you from this with my love, with my forgiveness. I want to free you from that. And so instead of self-punishing ourselves further, like I'm not good enough for God or whatever, it's just like, yeah, Dad, I want to admit to the places that I'm messy and acknowledge the hell, the prison cell that I feel like I'm in this. Dad, do you want to get me out of it? Yes. Okay. I'm available.
Yeah. And it's actually feels so good to not feel like you have to hold it all together and be the strong one and figure it all out and know everything. It feels good. Like I have way more dependence on God when I acknowledge that I'm still messy.
Yeah.
You know, the Dr. Hilo is a remarkable man, like very, very, I mean, I love him as a human. And he was talking about how humility is the number one thing that enabled him to grow was his ability to look at where he wasn't, what he wasn't.
Yeah.
Because then he could grow.
Yeah.
He's like, I realized I wasn't compassionate. So I had to watch people with compassion and I had to see how they interacted with people and I had to watch how they engaged and what they did. And I realized I wasn't warm. And so I had to I had to own it. I had to own I'm not warm. I'm not compassionate. The first thing is acknowledgement. And then I could watch other people because once you can acknowledge something, then you can learn and grow. And he just believed that he could learn everything.
Yeah.
So he has, like it was wild him telling me how because he feels so connected to himself and so affectionate and so kind and so he's just a wonderful human. To hear that wasn't natural to him blew my mind. But then it didn't because I'm like, as humans, we have the ability to rewire our brains and to relearn and to grow and become new from pain.
Yeah.
And so I just, I feel there's an invitation for people. I have a lot of performers that I've mentored and that want to be perfect. And they would literally like cry or scream or laugh uncontrollably because they literally thought the goal was to become perfect. The goal is to become perfect, though. I can do that. And that is a control mechanism. I want to control that no one can leave me.
Yeah.
I want to control that no one can say I'm bad. I want to control shame by never doing anything wrong. It's an illusion. You can't ever be perfect. You can't ever be enough. And so every time I would be like, no, the goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to be whole. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to be whole. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to be more human.
Yeah.
The goal is to be more present. The goal is to be like, I think about Paul Young, who we talk about, and he's been on here all the time. He's my hero because he's actually learned how to grieve with people who grieve now because he doesn't avoid pain. That was part of him becoming more whole.
Yeah.
More human. The more human he was, the more he could relate to humans.
Yeah.
And embracing our messiness enables us to relate to each other instead of playing the hierarchy game.
Right. And it, again, when you say relate to each other, it builds bridges versus walls. It starts mending broken connections. There's a lot less wars when we look at people and we go, oh, they're in the same boat as us.
Oh, I could be doing that same thing.
Yeah.
Or I maybe don't do it that way, but I have my own things I do.
Yeah. Yeah. We all have the same capacity to do very destructive behavior. I look at that in politics when politicians, I'm not going to give examples because it'll start a fire, but when I see politics and politicians from our
Both
country,
sides.
other countries, all over the place as people are throwing mud back and forth, I'm like, y'all are the same.
Yes.
You all have the same capacity for greed. You all have the same capacity for wanting to take more, destroy more, have more power, whatever it is. It's just like none of us are better than each other. We all have the same capacity. But I look at it, and the more that or the foundation to all of it begins with acknowledging I'm scared.
Yeah.
Because we're scared for all the reasons that we've listed before. And so sometimes something I was thinking as we were chatting here was like, in order for people to move forward in some of this stuff, we have to begin to ask ourselves, what am I scared? What part of my messiness am I scared to acknowledge to myself that I have?
Mm-hmm.
And what part am I scared to acknowledge to some of the closest relationships around me? And getting honest with that. And then beginning the process of going like, all right, what part of my messiness that I've been scared of acknowledging do I want to start with acknowledging?
Yeah.
Because for some of you, it's like, I don't even know where to go with that. I'm such a performer. I'm work so hard to earn people's love and stuff like that. And how about just start with like, what's one thing I'm scared to acknowledge to myself, and one thing I'm scared to acknowledge to other people?
And I think the thing I just keep thinking through is like, the whole goal is to be loved.
Yeah.
To be loved in our humanity, to love one another in our humanity. And the quickest pathway I've seen to love is to let go of that facade, that fake, that performance, and to find that people still, like, some people will still show up. You'll find people who still love you when you're really messy, and that love will change you from the inside out.
Yeah, it's really cool. Well, with that said, we want to wrap this up for all of you. One of my dreams for what we've done with the Connected Life is that we'd continually keep birthing people that are unashamedly aware of their messiness and are profoundly connected to compassion because of that. And that we would all continue as a global community, continually adding to the world through our compassion, our love, and our understanding of others because of our compassion, understanding, and love for ourselves. So that's my hope.
Yeah.
From everything that we do.
With that being said, all of this series and the last series we've been doing is so based on the Compassion Project. We made this when we went to Spain 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was to help fundraise to get to Spain. And it is one of the most, we get so many testimonies and feedback from this product changing their life because it is helping people tangibly learn how to hear the voice of compassion, how to connect to the feeling of compassion, how to see that they're worthy of compassion, and how to break up with judgment. And so it's our best priced course. If you're listening and you're like, I need this, go to justinandabby.com, and it's called the Compassion Project, and it'll change your life.
Yeah. With that said, you guys have done such an amazing job of like rating and reviewing and subscribing and sharing and stuff like that. We have some really incredible reviews on iTunes. And if you haven't had a chance, if you feel impacted by this episode and you haven't had a chance to go to especially iTunes, because a lot of people can see that there, it helps when you write a review and you leave a 5 stars, right? Because it's 5 stars. But when you leave those there, people actually see them and are gravitate towards participating in the Connected Life because they go, oh, a testimony is here in front of me that says that there's potential hope inside of this for my life if I go listen to it. So if you take time to do that for us, we feel so loved by it. And thanks for letting us spend time with you talking about messiness. As the future weeks and months come on, we'll talk more about our own messiness, and we'll see what happens with all that. Love y'all.
Love you.
Bye.